Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our Bible study through each chapter of the Bible in 5 minutes. Today is episode number 9. We're on Genesis 9, and I hope you've been enjoying these studies as much as I have. I've really gotten a lot from just creating them every day, making myself sit down, work through a chapter of the Bible every day. It just feels like your mind is constantly on the scriptures as you go throughout your day, and you're recalling things that you've studied, and hopefully you're getting the same effect out of listening to these and studying through them yourself. As always, the handout that you're about to see up on the screen, or the information that you're going to hear if you're listening to the podcast, is available for free download on our website at tobelikechrist.com, and that goes for all the chapters that we've studied. And so today, Genesis chapter 9. When did the events of Genesis 9 take place? Well, as we mentioned in the last couple chapters, the flood, the global flood of Noah's day, took place about 1,650 years after the earth was created. And so the events that we're going to read about today happened immediately after the flood. We don't have a lot of main characters, really just two in this chapter. We have Noah. He was the one who built the ark and survived the flood by God's grace. And then we have Noah's sons, and their names were Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And then our next question, where did these events take place? Well, as the waters of the flood subsided, the ark ran aground on the top of the mountains of Ararat. And nobody knows exactly where the mountains of Ararat were, but many people theorize that the ark's final resting place was somewhere in what we would consider northeast of modern-day Turkey. Now let's break this chapter down in our outline. So the first 7 verses, 1 through 7, God instructs Noah following the flood. He gives some instructions for going forward. So God told Noah and his sons to have children and to repopulate the earth, because there was only 8 people on the earth at this point. Wouldn't that be pretty crazy? And he gave the human beings all of the animals and the plants for food, but he told them not to eat animals or meat with blood in it. And that was because blood was to be respected. It gave life to humans and animals, and therefore it was sacred to some degree. He also told Noah that if a man killed another man, the murderer was to be put to death. Now that was probably a really important rule because there was a lot of violence on the earth before the flood, and that was not to be recreated now that God had destroyed all of that wickedness. Murder was a really serious crime because if you remember in Genesis chapter 1, God created man in his image. Our next section, verses 8 through 17, God makes a promise to Noah and he gives him the sign of the rainbow. So God made a covenant with Noah and his sons and with all the animals that came out of the ark. A covenant, according to Webster's dictionary, is a formal or solemn or binding agreement. So God is making a promise, basically. God promised never to flood the earth globally again and to destroy all flesh. And he gave Noah the sign of the rainbow as a reminder of this covenant. So if you've wondered why the outlines that we're using for Genesis are in this rainbow design, this is why. It's because God gave the rainbow as a sign of his promise. And then our final section, verses 18 through 29, Noah's drunkenness and Ham's curse. Noah had 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And one day, Noah became drunk off of the wine from his vineyard. And in his drunkenness, he fell asleep while naked. Now his son Ham saw his father naked, and he went and he told his 2 brothers what he had observed. Shem and Japheth took a garment, and they covered their father without looking at him in his embarrassing state. Now when Noah awoke and realized what had been done, and what Ham had done and what his other 2 children had done, he cursed Ham's son, who was named Canaan. And he declared that all of Ham's offspring moving forward would be servants to his brothers. In contrast to Ham's curse, Noah blessed Japheth and Shem for the kindness and the dignity that they had shown him. And then at the end of the chapter, we're told that Noah lived for 350 years after the flood, and he died at the age of 950. And so that is Genesis chapter 9. Now let's talk about an application as we close. Reminders of God's goodness are scattered all throughout nature, and we see this as we read more and more of the Bible. So the rainbow reminds us that God is not going to flood the earth again. God's care for the birds and the sparrows reminds us that God will provide for his children and give them their daily needs according to Jesus in Matthew chapter 6. Also in Matthew chapter 6, Jesus says that when you look out at the flowers of the field, it reminds us that God will clothe us, right? They're so beautifully adorned. Certainly God will take care of his children. The new lambs in the pasture every year remind us of the sacrifice and the gentleness of Jesus. And the lion on the savannah reminds us of God's power and his ability to protect us and to overcome our enemies.